Okay, for KIN 425, this is the last special topic that I want to cover for the course. This has to deal with jet lag to prevent detriments in performance. So this is important if you're an athlete and you're traveling across time zones and you want to optimize your performance. So this often happens in elite athletes, especially when they're traveling, across the world, to different countries to perform. My first question here is with regards to circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms refer to changes in hormones throughout the day, changes in your body temperature. So the question here is, when is the best time of the day for optimal strength and aerobic power performance? So if you're being evaluated, when will you perform the best? And the answer here is late afternoon or early evening, and it seems to parallel the changes in your core temperature. So when your core temperatures peak around late afternoon, early evening, that's when your performance is generally the best. Now, with jet lag, you can either travel east or west. So the question here is, does it take longer to adjust to a new time zone if you're traveling eastward or westward? And the answer here is that it takes you longer to adjust if you're going east. So for every hour that you travel west, it takes about half a day for you to adjust. And then for every hour you travel east, it takes about 1 day to adjust. For example, if you travel to Ontario right now, they are 2 hours ahead of us. It will take you 2 days after you arrive in Ontario to adjust to their time zone. Whereas you've traveled to British Columbia, they're 2 hours behind us, and it'll take just 1 day for you to adjust to their time zone. So why the difference? It's because it's easier to adjust to a longer day, which would happen if you traveled west. So right now, my time here is 10 p.m. in the evening, and so it's 8 p.m. in British Columbia. And so if I travel to British Columbia, essentially I would have a longer day, and it's just easier to adjust to that. When you travel east, the problem is sleeping at bedtime. So if I travel to Ontario, right now it's 10 p.m. in Saskatchewan. If I travel to Ontario, it would be midnight there. And, so you're midnight in Ontario, but you still feel like it's 10 p.m. So you have trouble sleeping at night. And so the problem with west travel is that you want to wake up early, whereas the problem with east travel is that you have trouble actually waking up in the morning because 8 a.m. in the morning Ontario time is 6 a.m. in the morning Saskatchewan time. The travel is reversed when you travel west, so it's easier to wake up early. So if you're trying to adjust to your day, it's just if you want to wake up early, it's an advantage. Whereas if you're traveling east and you want to sleep in and you're forced to wake up early, then you're going to be more tired throughout the day. So there's physiological changes that happen just before you go to sleep. And so the question here is, what hormone is released a couple of hours before you go to sleep? And the answer here is that it's melatonin. It's released from the pineal gland, which is a gland that's located kind of in the central part of your brain. And its release is actually stimulated by darkness, and it promotes sleep because it causes vasodilation and cooling. And you just sleep easier if you're a little bit cold. Its release is partially controlled by the hypothalamus, and it's controlled by light. So receptors in your retina, in your eye, are sensitive to light, and they send afferent input to the hypothalamus. So when it gets dark, your hypothalamus senses a decrease in light, and it sends a signal to your pineal gland to release melatonin. So which strategies can you use before you travel to a different time zone? So research has shown that you can successfully shift your sleep towards your destination time zone by about 30 to 60 minutes per day for 3 days. So before you leave for a destination, you can shave up to 3 hours off of your time zone difference by just adjusting the time you go to sleep. So if you're traveling, say, again to Ontario, and they're 2 hours ahead of us, then 2 days before you travel, you could try to go to sleep an hour earlier each day, and that will give you an adjustment to their time zone. Light exposure. So if you're traveling west, it's good to expose yourself to light early in the evening and early night, because remember, when you're traveling west, they're behind us. So 8 p.m. there in British Columbia, 8 p.m. would be the same thing as 10 p.m. here. So you want to be exposed to light when you travel west so that it forces you to stay awake longer. And then if you're traveling east, the problem with traveling east is it's hard to wake up in the morning. So if it's 8 a.m. in Ontario, it is 6 a.m. in Saskatchewan. And so if you're traveling to Ontario, if you really want to make sure that you wake yourself up, it's a good idea to expose yourself to light early in the morning. So what strategies can you use on the airplane when you're traveling to your destination? So I think it's you're most at an advantage if you can try to sleep on the airplane at your destination sleeping time, and that will help you adjust to your destination time zone quicker. And so it's a bit of a challenge because a lot of times on the airplane, especially if you're traveling, say, across the world to a very different time zone, they will, turn on the lights when it's daytime, when you're leaving, and everyone on the plane is noisy, but it's actually your destination sleeping time. And so you want to make sure that you block out all the noise and maybe wear a mask, to simulate darkness to help yourself sleep at your destination sleeping time. So some things you can do is you can make yourself colder. So you tend to sleep better if you're a little bit cold. Some people take a melatonin supplement, so it tricks your body into thinking that it's close to your sleeping time. And then adjust the lighting if possible. So if it's daylight at your departure time and you're on the airplane, but it's nighttime at your destination time, you want to try to make it dark, so you can wear like a mask over your eyes to try to make it dark, and maybe wear earplugs to block out the noise from people on the plane. And then you want to do the opposite. So you want to sleep at your destination nighttime. When it's your daytime at your destination, you want to make sure you're exposed to a lot of light on the plane. And then another strategy here is to drink caffeine at your destination morning time. So some people are sensitive to the effects of caffeine. So if you're hypersensitive to caffeine, this might not be a good strategy for you to use. But if you drink a lot of coffee normally and you're used to caffeine, then it could be beneficial for you to drink a couple of cups of strong coffee at your destination morning time to help you to adjust to that destination morning time. Some questions here. So when you arrive at your destination, so again, this is, if you're traveling halfway across the world, should you nap when you land? And the answer here is no, you should resist napping when you land. So, if you're traveling across the world, across a lot of time zones, when you land in the daytime, it might be nighttime at your departure time and you'll feel tired, but you should resist the urge to nap. You should try to force yourself to stay awake and adjust right away to your destination time zone. It's a good idea to do some light exercise after you land. So the light exercise will, it'll help you to stay awake during the daytime, but it'll also make you a little bit sleepy so that you can sleep easier at the nighttime at your destination. What you do eat for breakfast and what you eat for dinner. So again, if you're trying to adjust to a new time zone, generally high protein foods act as greater stimulants than, say, high carbohydrate foods. So for breakfast, you want to eat something that's high in protein. So maybe milk, cheese, meats, a high protein breakfast. And then for dinner, the things that make you tired or sleepy after eating dinner are high carbohydrate meals. So something like a plate of spaghetti for dinner, or a plate of pierogies or something like that. That will make you sleepy. So high protein foods for when you want to wake up at breakfast time, high carbohydrate foods if you want to feel tired, and so at your dinner time, high carbohydrate foods. Now, does lack of sleep increase your have effects on your health, and does it increase your risk of being overweight and obese? They know some answers to this question. This chart shows what happens or the increase in risk with children. So this is the children's odds of being obese. You can see lack of physical activity, of course. You have 1.5 times the odds of being obese if you're less active compared to active. Long hours watching TV, it doubles your odds. Your genetics also doubles your odds. You can see that lack of sleep in this particular study was the greatest predictor of children's obesity. So children that got less sleep compared to children that got enough sleep were 3.5 times at a greater risk for being obese. So it looks like your sleep duration definitely affects your odds of being obese. And these are the reasons. So there's actually a physiological reason why lack of sleep can increase your risk for obesity. And it has to do with hormones that are released when you're tired versus when you're rested. So when you're tired, you tend to release this hormone called ghrelin. And ghrelin is a hunger hormone, so it actually stimulates your hunger. So you'll notice if you stay up late, either watching TV or you stay up late studying, you tend to get hungry and you tend to snack a lot. That's probably because of this release of this hunger hormone called ghrelin that gets released when you're tired. Whereas if you're well rested, your adipose tissue actually releases a hormone called leptin that suppresses your appetite. So it makes you feel less hungry when you're rested. So the general recommendation for sleep for your age group, for young adults or adults in general, is 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So you want to get a minimum of 7 hours of sleep, and 9 hours would probably be optimum. Now, you've heard about the Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines. These are guidelines that have been released specifically for children and adolescents. And you can see the guidelines have 4 different components. So high intensity activities, low intensity activity throughout the day, reducing sitting time, so reducing sedentary behavior. We kind of covered some of these aspects earlier in the course. And a big component here is to actually increase your sleep duration. And you can see that's the component that occupies the greatest time. So with the revised Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines, they take into account your sedentary behavior, the amount of time you spend in physical activity, and also the amount of time you spend sleeping. Again, this is just for children and adolescents, but they are developing guidelines that follow along the same parameters for adults and older adults, and those will probably be released within the next 1 or 2 years. So you'll have to wait for those guidelines. They're all based on systematic reviews that are currently being reviewed, and that will go into the development of these guidelines. I'm going to continue this topic on a second presentation because I'm hitting the time limit here for YouTube.